Hello, everyone. Tonight, we begin with a question about love and wealth in a world of candlelight and castles. What did it mean to marry in medieval times when a dowry could make or break your future? Picture yourself in a bustling village square, the air thick with the scent of fresh baked bread and damp wool. Merchants haggle horses, clop over cobblestones, and a young woman named Alina, with calloused hands and a nervous smile, clutches a small wooden chest, her dowry, her ticket to a new life. You're about to step into the medieval marriage market where dowries weren't just gifts, but keys to social status, power, and survival. It's a dramatic, surprising story, and you might not make it through this voyage awake. Before you snuggle into your blanket, hit like on the video and comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's so fun to know who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in Alina's world where marriage is less about romance and more about strategy. A dowry, you learn, is the wealth a bride brings to her husband. Coins, land, livestock, or even a finely woven blanket. It's her contribution to the new household, but also a symbol of her family's worth. By the 12th century, dowries were standard across Europe, from dusty Italian city-states to rain-soaked English manors. They weren't optional. A woman without a dowry was like a cart without wheels, stuck. You watch Alina, her brown braid swinging as she adds a copper pot to her chest. She's a peasant, so her dowry is modest, a few linens, a goat, and her mother's silver ring. Yet it's everything her family can spare. You feel the weight of her hope, the fear that it won't be enough to win a decent match. Why did dowries matter so much? You wander through the village, past a blacksmith hammering a horseshoe, and overhear gossip about a lord's daughter whose dowry included 3 vineyards. That's the game dowries signaled status. A hefty dowry could lift a family's reputation, while a skimpy one might shame them. You chuckle at the thought of Alina's goat being her family's grand estate, a medieval joke that lands close to home. Historians still argue whether dowries empowered women or trapped them. But you see both sides in Alina's eyes: pride in her contribution, anxiety about being judged. You pause by a market stall where a merchant named Cedric, with a beard like tangled wool, boasts about his daughter's dowry. He's not just selling her hand, but his family's name. You notice Alina listening, her fingers tightening on her chest. Cedric's daughter will marry a guild member, her dowry of silks and silver, ensuring a comfortable life. Alina, though, will likely wed a farmer like Tomas, a lanky boy who's been eyeing her at church. You imagine holding her dowry chest. How heavy does it feel, knowing it carries her future? Here's a quirky tidbit. Some families included oddities in dowries, like a single chicken or a chipped saint statue, believing they brought luck. You smile, picturing Alina's goat chewing a saint's wooden foot, another medieval chuckle. But the truth is, stark dowries were economic glue binding families and fortunes. Without one, a woman might end up a spinster, dependent on her kin. You see Alina's mother, Marta, stitching a final cloth for the chest, her fingers trembling. Marta knows a good dowry means Alina won't go hungry. As the sun dips, casting golden streaks over the village, you follow Alina home. Her cottage smells of straw and stew. She kneels by her chest, whispering a prayer to Saint Catherine, patron of brides. You feel the flicker of her courage, like a candle in a drafty room. Dowries, you realize, weren't just about wealth. They were about belonging. Alina's chest holds more than goods. It holds her place in the world. You linger, wondering if Tomas will accept her offering, if her goat and ring will be enough. The village quiets and you sense the story stretching ahead full of deals, dreams, and dangers. For now, you rest in this moment, with Alina's hope lighting the way. You leave Alina's cottage behind, the scent of stew fading as you step into a wider world where dowries don't just shape one girl's fate, but entire social hierarchies. Picture yourself on a hill, overlooking a medieval town, its thatched roofs and stone towers bathed in morning mist. Below, a nobleman in a velvet cloak rides past a peasant hauling firewood, their lives divided by wealth and birth. Dowries, you see, are the threads stitching this rigid order together, deciding who climbs the social ladder and who stays rooted in the mud. You're drawn to the bustle of the town square, where marriages are brokered like market deals, each dowry a measure of status and ambition. As you weave through the crowd, you spot Cedric the merchant from yesterday, now haggling over a bolt of cloth. His daughter's dowry, you learn, isn't just a gift. It's a calculated move to align his family with a wealthier guild. By the 13th century, dowries had become a cornerstone of social mobility, especially in growing towns. A merchant's daughter, with a fat dowry, could marry into minor nobility, her coins and goods bridging the gap between classes. You chuckle, thinking of Cedric's silks as his noble bait, a medieval jest that rings true. But for peasants like Alina, the stakes are humbler. Her dowry might lift her from a tenant farmer's daughter to a landowner's wife, if only slightly. You pause by a stone fountain where a young noblewoman, Lady Eleanor, glides past, her silk gown catching the light. Her dowry, whispered about in the crowd, includes a manor and 100 sheep. You feel the weight of her privilege, but also her pressure. Her marriage will tie two noble houses, and her dowry must dazzle. Dowries, you realize, are a public spectacle, announcing a family's worth to the world. Historians still debate whether dowries reinforced class divides or softened them, but you see Eleanor's wealth cementing her place at the top while Alina's goat keeps her near the bottom. Imagine standing in Cedric's shoes, weighing your daughter's dowry. How much would you offer to secure her future? You notice Alina nearby, her eyes on Eleanor's gown, her fingers brushing her own patched skirt. She dreams of a better match, but her dowry limits her reach. You catch a quirky tidbit. In some towns, families paraded dowry chests through the streets like a medieval show and tell to flaunt their status. You grin, picturing Alina's goat trotting behind her chest, stealing the show, another gentle chuckle. The square hums with deals. You overhear a butcher boasting that his daughter's dowry includes a year's worth of smoked meat, a practical gift for a groom's household. Dowries, you see, are as much about survival as status. They ensure a couple's start from linens to livestock. For nobles like Eleanor, dowries are political tools, sealing alliances or settling feuds. You watch her father, Lord Baldwin, ride through the square, his face stern. His daughter's dowry will bind his house to a rival's, but only if the terms are perfect. You sense his pride, but also his fear of losing face. As noon sun warms the cobblestones, you follow Cedric to a tavern where he meets a prospective groom's father. The men clink mugs, but their eyes are sharp, sizing up each other's wealth. Cedric's daughter's dowry is his leverage, but he mustn't overspend and beggar himself. You recall Alina's mother, Marta, stitching late into the night her dowry for Alina, a sacrifice of their meager savings. Dowries, you understand, are a family's gamble, balancing status against survival. The tavern's smoky air wraps around you, and you feel the tension of these negotiations where love is a footnote to ambition. You step back into the square where a minstrel strums a lute, singing of a knight who won a bride's dowry and her heart. The crowd laughs, but you know the truth is thornier. Dowries could spark rivalries or ruin families who overreached. Alina, lingering nearby, watches the minstrel, her dowry chest at home, a quiet promise of her own story. You sense the social order humming around you, each dowry a brick in its walls. As the day fades, you're ready to follow Alina closer to see her dowry take shape and test her place in this unforgiving world. You're back in Alina's world, the village air sharp with the tang of wood smoke and damp earth. Picture yourself inside her family's cottage, its walls of wattle and daub glowing faintly in the flicker of a single tallow candle. Alina kneels by her dowry chest, her hands trembling as she folds a coarse linen shift, her most precious contribution yet. You're drawn into her quiet struggle. A peasant girl, piecing together a dowry that carries her hopes and her family's honor. This chest, rough-hewn and smelling of cedar, is her bridge to marriage, but its meager contents weigh on her heart. You feel the intimacy of this moment, the stakes of her effort in a world where a bride's worth is measured by what she brings. Alina's life, you see, revolves around this task. By the 12th century, peasant families across Europe scrimped and saved to provide dowries, even if it meant hunger. A dowry wasn't just a gift. It was a daughter's duty, a way to secure her place in a groom's home. Alina's chest holds a goat's tether, a copper pot, her mother's silver ring, and now this shift stitched over months by firelight. You watch her smooth the fabric, her fingers calloused from spinning wool. She's no noble with lands or gold, but her dowry is her pride, proof she's no burden. You chuckle softly, imagining her goat nibbling the shift's hem, a medieval mishap she'd laugh at too. You step closer, noticing Marta, Alina's mother, stirring a pot of barley pottage. Her face is lined, her eyes tired from years of toil. She's given up her ring for Alina's dowry, a sacrifice that stings. You sense the family's strain. Every item in that chest is something they can't replace. Historians still argue whether dowries empowered peasant women or yoked them to family debt. But you see both in Marta's hunched shoulders, love for Alina, fear of falling deeper into poverty. Imagine holding Alina's shift, its rough weave under your fingers. How much does her future weigh in this moment? A quirky tidbit catches your ear. Some peasant dowries included a bridal ale, a barrel of home-brewed beer, to toast the wedding doubling as a gift. You smile, picturing Alina's goat, knocking over the barrel, splashing the guests another gentle jest. But the truth is grimmer. Without a dowry, Alina might never marry, left to labor for her kin or beg at the church door. You watch her whisper to the chest as if it holds secrets. She's heard of Tom's the farmer's son, whose family wants a bride with something to offer. Her dowry must convince them she's enough. Outside, the village hums with spring chores. You hear a neighbor, old Githa, clucking about a girl who married with only a basket of apples as her dowry. The story stings Alina, who glances at her chest, doubting its worth. You follow her to the stream, where she washes another cloth to add to her hoard. The water's chill bites her hands, but she scrubs, fiercely driven by the need to prove herself. Dowries, you realize, are a peasant's armor, shielding girls like Alina from shame or spinsterhood. Her chest is small, but it's her claim to a future. As dusk settles, you linger in the cottage where Alina's younger brother Will carves a wooden spoon to add to the dowry. His knife slips, and he curses softly, earning a sharp look from Marta. The family's unity warms you, but their poverty chills. Alina's dowry is a collective effort, each item a piece of their survival. You recall Cedric's silks and Eleanor's manor worlds away, yet tied to the same game. Alina's chest, though humble, mirrors their ambition, a peasant's bid for respect. You feel her resolve like a steady pulse as she closes the chest and kneels to pray, the candle gutters casting shadows on the walls. Alina's dowry is nearly complete, but its success depends on Tomas's family. You sense the village watching, judging her worth by her chest's contents. The weight of their gaze presses on you too, as you stand with her in this fragile moment. Her story, you know, is just one thread in the tapestry of dowries, but it's alive with hope and fear. As the night deepens, you're ready to follow her further into the wider world where dowries weave fates. You're swept from Alina's humble cottage to a grand stone hall. Its walls hung with tapestries of hunting scenes, the air heavy with the scent of beeswax candles and roasted venison. Picture yourself standing in the shadows, watching Lady Eleanor the noblewoman from the town square as she sits poised on a carved oak chair. Her silk gown shimmers, but her eyes are sharp, tracking her father, Lord Baldwin, as he negotiates her marriage with a rival lord's envoy. Her dowry, a manor, 100 sheep, and a chest of gold coins is the centerpiece of this high-stakes deal. You're immersed in the world of noble marriages, where dowries don't just secure a bride's future, but forge alliances that can shift the balance of power. The hall crackles with tension. By the 13th century, noble dowries were diplomatic tools binding houses to prevent wars or secure trade routes. Eleanor's dowry, you learn, will tie her family to Lord Ranulph's, a gruff northern baron whose lands buffer Baldwin's from raiders. You watch Baldwin pace his velvet cloak swirling as he lists the dowry's assets. The envoy, a thin man with a fox-like grin, nods but presses for more. A vineyard, perhaps. You chuckle, thinking of Baldwin's pride as his bargaining castle, a medieval jest that lands in this lofty hall. Eleanor, though, sits silent, her fingers twisting a braided cord necklace, her role ornamental, yet crucial. You feel the weight of her dowry, not just in wealth, but in expectation. Noble women, like Eleanor, were pawns in their father's games, their dowries sealing treaties or settling feuds. Historians still debate whether such women wielded influence through their marriages or were merely traded like livestock. But you see both in Eleanor's steady gaze. She knows her worth, yet resents her lack of choice. Imagine standing in her place, your future hinging on a contract. How tightly would you grip that necklace? A quirky tidbit surfaces: some noble dowries included relics like a saint's finger bone, believed to bless the union. You smile, picturing Eleanor's sheep herded alongside a gilded reliquary, the shepherds scratching their heads, another gentle chuckle. But the stakes are real. If Baldwin's dowry fails to impress Ranulph, might ally with a rival, leaving Baldwin's lands vulnerable. You watch Eleanor rise to greet the envoy, her smile practiced but cold. Her dowry is her family's shield, but also her cage, binding her to a stranger's house. The hall's firelight dances on the walls as servants carry in a dowry chest, its iron bands gleaming. Unlike Alina's modest box, this one overflows with silks, jewels, and parchment deeds. You catch Baldwin's pride, but also his strain. Such a dowry stretches even his wealth. You recall Alina's goat and Marta's ring sacrifices of a different scale, but no less heartfelt. Dowries, you realize, are a universal language, spoken in gold or grain, shaping lives across the social divide. Eleanor's chest is a spectacle meant to dazzle, but it carries the same hopes, security status, a future. Outside, the castle courtyard buzzes with preparations. You hear a minstrel tuning his lute, hired to sing at the betrothal feast. Gossip swirls about Eleanor's dowry, some claiming it rivals a king's ransom. You spot a maid, Beatrice whispering to a groom about her own dream of marriage, her dowry, just a shawl and a prayer. The contrast stings, but you see the thread connecting them. Dowries define their worth in this world. You chuckle, imagining Beatrice's shawl outshining Eleanor's gold in a village tale, a third jest to lighten the mood. As night falls, you linger in the hall, where Baldwin and the envoy toast with spiced wine. Eleanor excuses herself, slipping to a window overlooking the moonlit moors. You sense her longing not for love, but for agency. Her dowry will bind two houses, but it won't free her. You feel the hall's warmth, the weight of its wealth, and the fragility of its deals. Alina's simple chest flickers in your mind, a humbler dowry, but no less vital. The story of dowries, you know, spans castles and cottages, and you're ready to explore its next chapter, where faith and tradition shape these gifts. You drift from the grand hall of Eleanor's castle to a stone church, its air cool and thick, with the scent of incense and damp moss. Picture yourself standing in the nave, where sunlight streams through stained glass windows, casting jewel-like colors on the flagstones. A priest, Father Anselm, with a tonsured head and ink-stained fingers, counsels a young bride-to-be about her dowry's spiritual weight. You're immersed in the church's grip on medieval marriage, where dowries aren't just worldly goods, but sacred offerings shaped by faith and divine law. The church bells toll softly, and you feel the rhythm of a world where clergy hold sway over hearts and contracts. Father Anselm's voice is gentle but firm, as he explains that a dowry honors God's plan for marriage, a union meant to build Christian households. By the 12th century, the church had cemented its role in regulating marriages, requiring dowries to ensure a couple's stability. You watch the bride, a merchant's daughter named Clara, nod solemnly, her hands clutching a rosary. Her dowry bolts of wool and a silver chalice will be blessed at the altar, tying her marriage to divine approval. You chuckle, imagining the chalice wobbling during the blessing. A clumsy medieval moment, your first gentle jest. You step closer, noticing Clara's mother Agnes adjusting her daughter's veil. Agnes whispers that the chalice was her own dowry's pride, passed down to secure Clara's match. The church, you learn, encouraged such gifts, viewing dowries as a bride's contribution to a godly union. But it also profited priests, often charged fees to bless dowries or settle disputes over them. Historians still argue whether the church empowered women through these rituals or reinforced their dependence on men. But you see both in Clara's eyes, devotion to her faith, anxiety about her worth. Imagine holding Clara's rosary, its beads smooth under your fingers. How much faith does it carry for her future? You catch a quirky tidbit. Some dowries included a prayer book believed to shield the couple from evil spirits. You smile, picturing Clara's wool bales stacked beside a tiny, ornate book. The priest squinting at its pages, your second chuckle. Yet the church's influence runs deeper. It preached that a dowryless woman was a risk unfit for marriage without means to support it. You recall Alina's modest chest, her goat a far cry from Clara's chalice, yet both blessed under the same sacred roof. The church fills with villagers here for Clara's betrothal. You spot Alina in the crowd, her patched skirt brushing the floor, her eyes on the chalice. She's heard Father Anselm preach that dowries please God, and she worries her own offering falls short. You feel her doubt, a quiet ache in this holy space. The church's rules you see touch every bride, from nobles like Eleanor to peasants like Alina. Father Anselm raises his hands blessing the dowry, and you notice Clara's groom, a tanner named Hugh, shifting nervously. His family expects Clara's wealth to boost their trade, a reminder that even sacred rituals serve worldly ends. Outside, the churchyard hums with gossip. You overhear old Githa, the village busybody, clucking about a dowry dispute settled by the bishop who took a cut of the goods. You chuckle, imagining Githa's wagging finger outpacing the bishop's greed, your third jest. But the truth is stark. The church's authority over dowries could make or break families. You recall Eleanor's manor, its deeds likely stamped with a bishop's seal and Alina's ring blessed in a humbler rite. Dowries, you realize, are woven into the church's power, a blend of faith and finance. As Vespers nears you, linger by the altar, where Clara kneels, her dowry chest open for all to see. Father Anselm chants a prayer, his voice a soothing drone, and you feel the weight of tradition pressing on her. Alina, still in the crowd, clutches her own prayer, a hope that her dowry will pass muster. The church, you see, is both guide and gatekeeper, shaping these women's paths with its blessings and its rules. The candles flicker their light soft as the story shifts, ready to carry you into the bustling markets where dowries fuel new deals. You step from the church's cool sanctity into the clamor of a medieval city market, where the air hums with the tang of spices, sweat, and fresh-cut timber. Picture yourself weaving through crowded stalls, merchants shouting over the clatter of carts and the bleat of tethered goats. You're following Cedric, the bearded merchant from the town square, as he navigates this urban marriage market, his daughter's dowry, a mix of silks, coins, and a share in a wool trade, his key to securing a prosperous match. You're plunged into a world where dowries drive commerce and ambition, turning betrothals into business deals as sharp as any market bargain. The market pulses with life. By the 13th century, cities like Florence and Bruges thrived on trade, and dowries were their economic fuel, linking merchant families to guild power or even minor nobility. You watch Cedric pause at a cloth stall, fingering a bolt of crimson velvet, calculating if it could sweeten his daughter's dowry. His goal is a betrothal to a vintner's son, whose family controls a lucrative wine route. You chuckle, imagining Cedric's silks unfurled like a merchant's battle flag, a medieval jest that fits this haggling world. His daughter Marjorie trails behind her eyes, scanning the crowd, aware her future hinges on her father's deal. You feel the market's energy, its deals as intricate as the weaves Cedric sells. Dowries here aren't just gifts, they're investments, binding families to shared profits. Cedric's dowry will ensure Marjorie's husband can expand his trade while her family gains a foothold in the wine market. Historians still debate whether urban dowries gave women leverage or reduced them to commodities. But you see both in Marjorie's poised silence. She's a partner in her father's ambition, yet voiceless in its execution. Imagine standing at Cedric's stall, weighing a coin for Marjorie's dowry. How much would you risk for her match? A quirky tidbit catches your ear. Some merchant dowries included a trade token, like a branded barrel stave, symbolizing a share in the groom's business. You smile, picturing Marjorie's silks bundled with a splintered stave, the vintner's son scratching his head, your second chuckle. But the stakes are high. A failed dowry deal could sink Cedric's reputation, leaving Marjorie unmarried and his trade weakened. You watch him haggle with the vintner's father, their voices low, their smiles tight. The dowry's terms, how many coins, how much wool will seal or break the betrothal. You wander past a spice merchant, his saffron scenting the air, and overhear gossip about a dowry gone wrong. A weaver's daughter whose promised coins never materialized, shaming her family. You recall Alina's modest chest, her goat a world away from Cedric's silks, yet tied to the same need for approval. Urban dowries, you realize, amplify the game, their wealth fueling not just marriages, but city economies. Cedric's deal, if it lands, will ripple through the market-boosting trade for both families. You spot Marjorie adjusting her embroidered cap, her face calm, but her fingers restless, betraying her nerves. The sun climbs, warming the cobblestones. You linger by a tavern where Cedric and the vintner's father share a mug of ale, their laughter forced as they near agreement. A minstrel strums nearby, singing of a merchant who won a bride with a dowry of stars. Pure romance, you think, chuckling at the gap between song and this gritty deal, your third jest. But the truth cuts deeper. Dowries here are power, not poetry. Marjorie's silks will bind her to a stranger, her life reshaped by her father's market savvy. You feel the weight of her dowry, its coins clinking like the market's heartbeat. As evening shadows stretch, you see Cedric shake hands, the deal struck. Marjorie stands apart, her gaze on the horizon, perhaps dreaming of a life beyond the market's din. You recall Eleanor's manner and Alina's ring, each dowry a different note in the same song of status and survival. The market quiets, but its energy lingers, a reminder that dowries are the city's lifeblood, weaving families into its wealth. You're ready to leave this urban whirl, to follow the dowry's story, back to the rural fields where Alina's world waits. You leave the city's bustling market behind, its clamor fading as you step into the quiet of a rural village where the air smells of freshly turned earth and blooming hawthorn. Picture yourself walking along a muddy path, past fields striped with barley and rye, where peasants bend under the weight of their labor. You're following Alina again, her patched skirt swaying as she carries a basket of eggs to trade for a dowry item, a length of wool cloth perhaps to add to her chest. You're immersed in the harsh realities of rural life, where dowries are scraped together from meager harvests, and every egg or goat is a sacrifice for a daughter's future. The village hums with the rhythm of survival. By the 12th century, rural families across Europe toiled to provide dowries, often at the cost of their own sustenance. You watch Alina barter with a weaver, her voice steady but her eyes anxious. Her dowry still just a goat. A pot, a ring, and a few linens must compete with other girls' offerings to win Thomas's family. You chuckle, imagining her goat escaping to nibble the weaver's loom, a rural mishap that'd spark laughter, your first gentle jest. Alina's dowry, though small, is her family's gamble, a bid to secure her a stable match. You pause by a stone wall, where Alina's mother Marta mends a fishing net, her fingers raw from work. She's traded a week's butter for that wool cloth, a choice that means leaner meals. Rural dowries, you see, are woven from such sacrifices, each item a piece of the family's survival. Historians still debate whether these dowries gave peasant women security or deepened their families' poverty. But you feel both in Marta's weary sigh, love for Alina, fear of hunger. Imagine holding Alina's basket, its eggs warm against your palms. How much hope does each one carry? A quirky tidbit surfaces: some rural dowries included a hearth gift, like a fire iron, to symbolize the bride's role in keeping the home warm. You smile, picturing Alina's goat tethered to a rusty iron, bleeding in protest, your second chuckle. But the truth is grim. Without a dowry, Alina risks spinsterhood, a burden on her kin, in a world where every mouth must earn its bread. You watch her return home, her new cloth clutched tight, and notice her brother Will whittling a dowry spoon, his face set with determination. The family's unity warms you, but their poverty chills. The village green buzzes with evening chatter. You overhear old Githa, the gossip, clucking about a girl whose dowry was just a sack of turnips, barely enough for a shepherd's son. Alina nearby flinches her own chest. Suddenly, feeling lighter than it should. You follow her to the cottage, where she kneels by her dowry, whispering to St. Catherine for strength. Rural dowries, you realize, are a fragile shield protecting girls like Alina from shame, but exposing their families to risk. You recall Cedric's silks and Eleanor's manor worlds apart, yet bound by the same dowry game. As dusk settles, you linger in the cottage where Marta stirs, a thin pottage, her eyes on Alina's chest. The wool cloth lies folded, a small victory, but the family's stores are dwindling. You chuckle, imagining Geetha's turnips, outshining Alina's goat in a village tale, your third jest. But the stakes are real. Alina's dowry must convince Tomas's parents, or her future dims. You feel the cottage's warmth, the flicker of their hope, and the weight of their struggle. Alina's chest, though humble, is a testament to their love, each item a stitch in her story. The fire crackles, casting shadows on the walls. You see Alina trace her mother's ring, her resolve hardening. Her dowry is nearly ready, but its success hangs on the village's judgment. You recall Marjorie's market deal, sealed with coins, and sense the contrast. Rural dowries are born of sweat, not silver. The night deepens, and you're ready to follow Alina's story further into a world where dowries spark disputes and test the bonds of family. You remain in the village, but the quiet of Alina's cottage fades as you're drawn to a tense scene by the churchyard where a crowd gathers under a gray autumn sky. The air carries the bite of frost and the faint smell of damp wool. Picture yourself standing among the villagers, watching a widow named Edith. Her face lined with grief and defiance, argue with her late husband's kin over her dowry's fate. Her gray shawl slips as she gestures, her voice sharp against the murmurs. You're immersed in the precarious world of widows, where dowries, once a bride's pride, become battlegrounds testing family ties and social order. Edith's story grips you. By the 13th century, widows in Europe faced fierce disputes over dowries, which were meant to support them after their husband's death. Edith's dowry, a small plot of land, a cow, and a chest of linens, was her lifeline when her husband, a miller, died. Now, his brothers claim the land, arguing it belongs to their clan. You watch Edith clutch a worn parchment, her marriage contract, as she pleads her case to Father Anselm. You chuckle, imagining her cow wandering into the church during the dispute, lowing for justice, a medieval jest that lightens the mood. You step closer, feeling the crowd's eyes on Edith. Widows, you learn, were vulnerable. Their dowries, meant to ensure independence, often sparked greed. The church taught that a widow's dowry was her right, but custom favored male heirs. Historians still debate whether dowries protected widows or exposed them to exploitation. But you see both in Edith's trembling hands, resolved to keep her land, fear of losing everything. Imagine holding her parchment, its ink faded but heavy with her future. How fiercely would you fight for her rights? A quirky tidbit emerges. Some widows hid dowry items like a ring sewn into a hem to keep them from grasping kin. You smile, picturing Edith's linens stuffed with secret coins, outwitting her brothers-in-law, your second chuckle. But the stakes are dire. Without her dowry, Edith faces poverty, reliant on charity, or forced to remarry. You notice Alina in the crowd, her eyes wide, clutching her own dowry's ring. She sees her future in Edith's struggle, a reminder that even a secured dowry can slip away. You feel the chill of that truth, as sharp as the autumn wind. The churchyard hums with whispers. Old Geetha, ever the gossip, mutters about a widow who lost her dowry to a scheming nephew, left to beg at the manor gate. Edith's case, though, draws Father Anselm's attention. He promises to consult the bishop, but his tone is cautious. You recall Eleanor's manor, safe in noble contracts, and Cedric silks guarded by market deals. Rural widows like Edith, you realize, face a lonelier fight, their dowries fragile against family greed. You chuckle imagining Githa's gossip outpacing the bishop's verdict, her tongue sharper than any quill your third jest. As the crowd thins, you follow Edith to her cottage, a low structure smelling of straw and herbs. She kneels by her dowry chest, tracing its carved lid, her cow tethered outside. Her land, she whispers, was her mother's gift, a link to her past. You sense her grief, not just for her husband, but for her dwindling security. Alina, lingering nearby, offers a loaf of bread, a small kindness. The gesture warms you, tying these women through their dowries' shared weight. You see Marta's ring in Alina's hand, a humble echo of Edith's land, both symbols of resilience. Dusk settles, the village hushed. Edith's dispute awaits the bishop's ruling, but her defiance lingers a spark in the gloom. You feel the churchyard's tension, the crowd's judgment, and the fragility of a widow's place. Alina, heading home, glances back at Edith's cottage, her own dowry chest heavier in her mind. You recall Marjorie's market betrothal, sealed with ease, and sense the rural world's harsher edges. The story of dowries, you know, is laced with loss as much as hope, and you're ready to explore its next turn, where laws shape these battles. You linger in the village, the churchyard's tension fading as you're drawn to a dusty manor hall, where the scent of old parchment and wax seals fills the air. Picture yourself standing by a trestle table where a scribe scratches ink onto vellum, recording a dowry agreement under the watchful eye of a local lord. You're immersed in the world of medieval law, where dowries are governed by a tangle of customs charters and church decrees shaping the rights and wrongs of brides and their families. The hall's torchlight flickers, and you feel the weight of rules that bind Alina's goat, Eleanor's manor, and Edith's land to the same legal web. The scribe, a wiry man named Godfrey, mutters about a case, a bride whose dowry was promised but never delivered, sparking a feud. By the 13th century, laws across Europe, secular and ecclesiastical, tried to regulate dowries, ensuring brides weren't cheated and families honored contracts. You watch Godfrey note a dowry for a knight's daughter, 2 fields and a silver goblet sealed with the Lord's ring. You chuckle, imagining the goblet rolling off the table, denting the Lord's pride, a medieval jest that suits this solemn hall. But the law's grip is firm, meant to protect wealth and order. You step closer, noticing a peasant woman, Hilda, clutching a worn cloth as she pleads her case. Her daughter's dowry, a pig and a quilt, was seized by the groom's family after the betrothal broke. Hilda seeks the Lord's justice, but her voice shakes. Peasants rarely win against wealthier kin. Historians still debate whether dowry laws favored the powerful or offered brides some shield, but you see both in Hilda's defiance hope for fairness, fear of dismissal. Imagine holding her cloth, its stitches tight with her labor. How much trust would you place in this hall's justice? A quirky tidbit surfaces: some regions require dowry disputes to be settled by oath-swearing with neighbors vouching for a bride's goods. You smile, picturing old Githa swearing Alina's goat was the finest in the parish, her exaggeration sparking laughter, your second chuckle. But the truth cuts deep. Laws often failed women like Hilda, whose modest dowries were easily dismissed, while nobles like Eleanor saw their manors guarded by parchment and power. You recall Edith's fight for her land, her parchment waved in vain, and sense the law's uneven hand. The hall hums with activity. You overhear a clerk discuss a church law: dowries must be returned if a marriage fails unless the bride was at fault. This rule meant to protect often trapped women in bad unions, fearing loss of their goods. You spot Alina outside, peering through a window, her dowry chest on her mind. She's heard of girls like Hilda's daughter, left with nothing, and it fuels her fear about Tomas's family. You feel her worry, a quiet pulse in this legal maze. Dowry laws, you realize, are a double-edged sword, promising order, but often serving the strong. As noon light filters through the hall, you follow Godfrey to a side chamber where he stores records of dowry disputes. Parchments, stacked like autumn leaves. One tells of a widow who won her dowry back by proving her husband's kin lied, a rare victory. You chuckle, imagining Githa's gossip, fueling the widow's case, her tales sharper than any scribe's quill, your third jest. But Hilda's case lingers her cloth, a fragile plea. You recall Cedric's market deal, sealed with ease, and Eleanor's manor, safe in noble contracts. Rural women you see face a steeper climb, their dowries vulnerable to legal whims. The hall quiets as the Lord departs, leaving Hilda awaiting judgment. You sense her resolve, like a candle in a drafty room, and Alina's fear tied to her own dowry's fate. The law's weight presses on you, its rules shaping every chest from Alina's ring to Eleanor's gold. You recall Edith's cow tethered in hope, and feel the story's thread dowries are as much about justice as wealth. As the scribe's quill scratches on, you're ready to leave this hall to explore the quirks and customs that color dowries across the medieval world. You step from the manor hall's dusty air into a vibrant patchwork of medieval regions, each with its own twist on the dowry tradition. Picture yourself wandering a sunlit road that stretches from the olive groves of Tuscany to the windswept moors of Yorkshire, the scents of rosemary and wet peat mingling in your senses. You're exploring the quirky, colorful customs that shape dowries across Europe, where local traditions add flair to the marriage market. From village fairs to castle feasts, you see how dowries reflect not just wealth, but the unique pulse of each culture, tying Alina's goat to a broader tapestry. Your first stop is a bustling Italian city-state where a bride named Lucia parades her dowry chest through the streets accustomed by the 13th century to flaunt family pride. Her chest brims with embroidered linens and a gilded mirror drawing gasps from the crowd. You chuckle, imagining her tripping over a cobblestone, the mirror flashing sunlight like a signal, a playful medieval jest. In Italy, dowries were public spectacles, often including art or jewelry to signal status. You recall Cedric's silks, a merchant's boast, and see Lucia's mirror as her family's banner in this urban stage. You wander north to a German village where a bride's dowry might include a morning gift given by the groom the day after the wedding, like a carved stool or a cow. This custom, you learn, balanced the bride's dowry, ensuring mutual investment. A quirky tidbit catches you: some grooms gifted a single goose, believed to bring fertility. You smile, picturing Alina's goat eyeing a goose suspiciously, a rural comedy, your second chuckle. Yet these customs mattered. Historians still debate whether regional dowry practices empowered brides or reinforced local power structures. But you see both in Lucia's proud stride and a German bride's shy acceptance of her stool. Imagine holding Lucia's mirror, its weight cool in your hands. How much of her future does it reflect? You move to England, where rural dowries often included practical goods like a churn or a sack of barley. But some families added a luck token, a pebble painted with a cross. You spot Alina in your mind's eye, her dowry ring, a humble echo of these tokens, her village not so different from Yorkshire's. Her goat, you realize, fits this patchwork. Each region's customs shape the same need for security and status, from mirrors to pebbles. In France, you pause at a noble betrothal, where the bride's dowry includes a falcon, a symbol of prestige. You recall Eleanor's manor, her dowry a grander gesture, but the falcon's sharp eyes mirror her own calculated role. French nobles, you learn sometimes, gifted land with specific trees, oaks for strength, vines for wealth. You chuckle, imagining a groom counting oaks, while the falcon escapes a noble mishap, your third jest. These customs, though, wove dowries into local identity, making each marriage a cultural act from Alina's cottage to Lucia's city. As you drift through a Spanish market, you hear of dowries with bridle iron, a knife or tool to mark the bride's household role. The scent of saffron lingers as you picture a bride sharpening her iron, her dowry chest nearby. You recall Edith's cow, her fight for her dowry's land, and sense the thread across regions. Dowries are personal yet universal, shaped by local flavor, but driven by the same hopes. Each custom. Italian parades German geese, English pebbles adds color to the marriage market. But also pressure, as brides like Alina must meet their region's expectations. The road quiets as dusk falls, the sky streaked with gold. You feel the weight of these customs, their charm and their burden. Alina's ring, Lucia's mirror, Eleanor's manor. All dowries, all different, yet all tied to the same game of status and survival. You see Marta's tired hands stitching for Alina, and Lucia's proud smile, her chest on display. The story of dowries, you know, is as varied as the lands you've crossed, but its heart beats in every village and castle. You're ready to follow it further into the rivalries that dowries ignite. You leave the vibrant mosaic of regional customs and step into a charged village scene where the air crackles with rivalry in the scent of hay and wood smoke. Picture yourself on a grassy common where two families face off, their voices rising as they dispute a dowry's worth under the shadow of a gnarled oak. You're following Alina, her eyes wide as she watches the feud unfold, her own dowry chest suddenly feeling like a spark in a dry field. You're immersed in a world where dowries don't just build marriages, but ignite bitter contests as families vie for status and pride in the medieval marriage market. The dispute centers on a baker's daughter whose dowry, a pig, a kettle, and 3 bolts of cloth, has been deemed too meager by the groom's kin, a family of weavers. By the 13th century, dowries often sparked such clashes as families measured their honor against their neighbors' offerings. You watch the baker, a stout man named Rolf, gesture wildly, insisting his pig is the fattest in the parish. The weaver's matriarch Hilda scoffs, her arms crossed, claiming her son deserves better. You chuckle, imagining the pig grunting in protest, stealing the crowd's attention, a medieval jest that cuts the tension. You feel the heat of the feud, its roots deeper than cloth or livestock. Dowries were public declarations, and a slighted dowry could shame a family for years. Hilda's taunt isn't just about the pig. It's a jab at Rolf standing a challenge to his place in the village pecking order. Historians still argue whether dowry rivalries strengthened community bonds or fractured them. But you see both in the crowd's murmurs. Some nod with Rolf, others smirk with Hilda. Imagine standing between them, holding Rolf's kettle. How heavy does this feud feel in your hands? A quirky tidbit surfaces in some villages. Dowry disputes were settled by a gift race where families added to their offerings until one backed down. You smile, picturing Rolf tossing in a loaf, Hilda countering with a shawl, the pig bewildered, your second chuckle. But the stakes are real. A rejected dowry could ruin the baker's daughter, leaving her unmarriageable, while Hilda's son risks scorn if the feud drags on. You notice Alina clutching her mother's ring, her face pale. She knows her own dowry, with its lone goat, could face similar judgment from Tomas's family. The common buzzes with onlookers, including old Githa, whose gossip fans the flames. She whispers that Rolf's pig was half-starved last winter, earning glares from his kin. You recall Edith's fight for her widow's dowry, another battle over worth, and sense the pattern dowries are kindling for pride, sparking fights from cottages to castles. You spot Father Anselm approaching, his tonsured head gleaming, hoping to mediate. He urges charity, but Hilda's sharp retort cuts through, a reminder that status often trumps faith. You chuckle, imagining Githa's tongue outpacing Anselm's prayers, a village gesture third. As the sun dips, you follow Alina home, the feud's echo lingering. She kneels by her dowry chest, tracing her copper pot, her fear sharpened by the day's clash. You feel her pulse quicken, knowing Tomas's parents will soon judge her offering. Her goat, her ring, her linens, each item, now feels like a wager in a game of rivalries. You recall Eleanor's manor, its grandeur unchallenged, and Cedric's silks bargained smoothly. Rural dowries, you see, invite scrutiny, their modesty a target for scorn. Alina's mother, Marta, stirs a thin stew, her silence heavy with worry for her daughter's fate. The cottage glows faintly, its fire a fragile warmth. You sense the village's eyes on Alina, the weight of its rivalries pressing her dowry's worth. The baker's feud unresolved hangs like smoke, a warning of what she might face. You see her whisper to St. Catherine, her resolve fraying but unbroken. Dowries, you realize, are more than gifts. They're battlegrounds where status is won or lost. As the night deepens, you're ready to follow Alina's story into the wider currents of wealth and trade, where dowries fuel more than just marriages. You slip away from the village's tense common, the feud's bitter words fading as you're swept into a broader current of medieval life, where the scent of wool iron and sea salt fills the air. Picture yourself standing on a bustling trade road where carts groan under loads of grain and merchants shout deals across a riverbank market. You're exploring how dowries fuel the economic engine of the medieval world, turning marriages into cogs in a vast machine of wealth and commerce. Alina's goat, Eleanor's manor, and Cedric's silks all pulse through this network, binding families to markets and power. The road hums with purpose. By the 13th century, dowries were more than personal gifts. They drove trade from rural villages to thriving ports. You watch a wool merchant, Simon, barter a bale for a dowry chest as hinges his daughter's betrothal to a shipwright hinging on the deal. Dowries, you learn, moved goods, cloth, livestock coins through economies linking households to markets. You chuckle, imagining Simon's wool bale unrolling down the road, tripping a passing monk, a medieval jest that suits this lively scene. Simon's dowry, like Cedric's, will boost his trade ties, his daughter's marriage a knot in the web of commerce. You pause by the river, where barges unload spices and timber. A dowry's wealth you see ripples outward. Simon's hinges will equip a shipwright's workshop, while the shipwright's new vessel will carry wool to Flanders. Noble dowries, like Eleanor's manor, funded knights or rebuilt castles, strengthening lords' grip on trade routes. Historians still debate whether dowries spurred economic growth or concentrated wealth in few hands, but you feel both in the market's pulse: opportunity for merchants like Simon, exclusion for peasants like Alina. Imagine holding one of Simon's hinges, its iron cool in your palm. How far does its value travel? A quirky tidbit catches you: some dowries included trade debts, promises of future goods, like a baker owing bread for a groom's kin. You smile, picturing Alina's goat, traded for a vague IOU, bleeding in confusion, your second chuckle. But the truth is stark. Dowries tied families to markets, but peasants struggled to compete. You recall Alina's dowry, her copper pot, a humble offering, its value dwarfed by Simon's bales. Her marriage to Tomas if it happens, will keep her family fed, not fund fleets. You see her in your mind, bartering eggs for cloth, her dowry a small spark in this economic fire. The market thrums with deals. You overhear a smith boasting that his daughter's dowry, a set of tools, won her a mason's son, their union sparking a new guild contract. You spot old Githa, the village gossip haggling nearby, her tales of dowry deals as sharp as any merchant's ledger. You chuckle imagining Githa's gossip, traded as a dowry, outvaluing Simon's wool, your third jest. But the smith's pride underscores a truth: dowries were capital building wealth for those who could afford them. You recall Edith's fight for her widow's land, her dowry's loss, a blow to her place in this economic dance. As noon sun glints off the river, you follow Simon to a tavern where he toasts the shipwright's father, their daughter's dowries, sealing a partnership. The air smells of ale and ambition. You sense the market's rhythm, its wealth flowing through every chest from Alina's ring to Eleanor's gold. Peasants, though, scrape to join this current, their dowries more about survival than surplus. You picture Alina's mother Marta trading butter for wool, her sacrifice a faint echo of Simon's bales. Dowries, you realize, are the market's lifeblood, but their weight falls unevenly, lifting some while anchoring others. Dusk settles the trade road quieter now. You feel the market's energy lingering its deals, shaping lives far beyond the riverbank. Alina's dowry, small as it is, ties her to this world, her goat, a humble offering in a game of wealth. You recall Lucia's mirror in Italy, flashing status, and sense the economic thread weaving them all. Dowries drive more than marriages. They drive progress. As the stars emerge, you're ready to follow Alina's story into a new realm where brides challenge the dowry's rules and rewrite their fates. You're pulled from the bustling trade road back to the village where the air is thick with the scent of damp straw and the faint tang of cider from a nearby press. Picture yourself standing in a moonlit clearing where a group of young women whisper defiantly, their voices low but fierce. You're following Alina, her eyes glinting with a spark of rebellion as she listens to a bold friend, Sarah, who dares to question the dowry's iron grip. You're immersed in a rare moment of resistance where brides challenge the weight of tradition, risking shame to reshape their place in the medieval marriage market. The clearing hums with quiet courage. By the 13th century, dowries were non-negotiable, but some women pushed back, refusing to let their worth be measured by chests alone. You watch Sarah, her auburn hair loose, declare, she'll marry a blacksmith's son, without a dowry, trusting his love over custom. Alina, clutching her mother's ring, hesitates, but listens, her heart stirred. You chuckle, imagining Sarah's dowry, Lys' betrothal, sealed with a stolen apple, the village buzzing with shock, a medieval jest that fits this daring scene. Sarah's defiance, though, is a gamble, one that could leave her shunned or free. You step closer, feeling the night's chill. Sarah's rebellion isn't just personal. It challenges the village's order, where dowries tie families to status and survival. You recall the baker's feud, sparked by a meager pig, and see why Sarah's stand unnerves her kin. Historians still debate whether such acts of resistance reshaped dowry customs or were crushed by tradition. But you see both in Alina's tense shoulders, longing to join Sarah, fear of losing her family's trust. Imagine holding Sarah's apple, its weight light, but its meaning heavy. How bold would you be in her place? A quirky tidbit emerges: in some regions, women who refused dowries were called bare brides, rumored to bring either luck or ruin. You smile, picturing Sarah striding past old Githa bare bride and proud Githa's gossip, trailing like dust. Your second chuckle. But the risks are real. Without a dowry, Sarah might face scorn, her blacksmith's love tested by his family's need for goods. You notice Selena, her fingers tracing her ring, thinking of Tomas. She spent years building her dowry goat pot linens, yet Sarah's words make her wonder. Could she marry for herself, not her chest? The clearing grows quieter, the women's whispers fading as footsteps approach. You spot Marta, Alina's mother, her face stern, urging Alina home. Marta's life, you realize, was shaped by dowries. She sees Sarah's rebellion as folly, a threat to survival. You recall Edith's fight for her widow's dowry, another woman battling custom, and sense the thread resistance is rare because it's costly. Alina hesitates, torn between Sarah's fire and Marta's caution. You chuckle, imagining Githa dubbing Sarah, the apple bride, her tale, outshining the cider press, your third jest. As the moon climbs, you follow Alina back to her cottage, the rebellion's echo lingering. She kneels by her dowry chest, its contents a tether to tradition. You feel her conflict, a storm beneath her calm. Sarah's words have cracked something open, but the village's eyes, Githa's, Thomas's, the church's press her to conform. You recall Eleanor's manner, her role fixed by wealth, and Cedric's silks, his daughter's fate sealed by trade. Alina's dowry, though humble, is her anchor, yet Sarah's defiance makes her question its chains. The cottage glows faintly, its fire a soft pulse. You see Marta stir a pot, her silence heavy with worry. Alina's dowry is nearly ready, but Sarah's rebellion has sown doubt, making its weight feel both vital and oppressive. You sense the village's rhythm, its traditions as steady as the seasons, yet fragile when challenged. Alina whispers to St. Catherine, not for approval, but for clarity. Dowries, you realize, are a choice as much as a duty, and some brides, like Sarah, dare to rewrite the rules. As the night deepens, you're ready to trace the dowry's shifting meaning, its story evolving through time. You slip from the moonlit clearing's rebellious whispers into the fading light of a changing medieval world where the scent of aging parchment and blooming orchards lingers. Picture yourself walking through a market town, its streets quieter now, as the old ways of dowries begin to shift under new ideas and pressures. You're following Alina, her dowry chest nearly complete, as she navigates a society where the meaning of dowries, once rigid symbols of status and survival, starts to bend, reflecting deeper changes in love, law, and faith. You're immersed in a pivotal moment where dowries evolve, reshaping the marriage market's heart. The town hums with subtle change. By the late 14th century, dowries were still central, but their symbolism was shifting. You watch a young couple, Beatrice and John, barter a modest dowry, a few coins, a quilt, and a shared plot of land. Less about status, more about partnership. The church, now preaching mutual consent in marriage, softens the dowry's economic edge, while rising trade wealth lets some brides negotiate terms. You chuckle, imagining Beatrice's quilt, outshining a noble's gold in John's eyes, a new kind of medieval romance, your first gentle jest. Alina nearby sees this, her own dowry's goat, suddenly feeling less like a burden. You pause by a tavern where merchants discuss a new trend, dowries split between goods and promises like future trade shares. This shift, you learn, reflects growing economies where cash and contracts rival land or livestock. Historians still debate whether these changes gave women more agency or tied them to new forms of wealth. But you see both in Beatrice's confident smile. She's a partner, yet still judged by her quilt's worth. Imagine holding her coins, their edges worn but gleaming. How much freedom do they buy in this changing world? A quirky tidbit catches you. Some towns began taxing dowries, treating them as transactions, with scribes noting every spoon or cow. You smile, picturing Alina's goat taxed as one bleeding asset, the scribe dodging its horns, your second chuckle. But the shift is real. Dowries, once sacred gifts, are now partly bureaucratic, their spiritual weight fading as markets grow. You recall Sarah's rebellion, her bare bride defiance, and see its echo here. Beatrice's dowry, though traditional, feels lighter, more her own. Alina, clutching her mother's ring, wonders if her chest could mean more than status, perhaps a shared life with Thomas. The market square buzzes with evening trade. You overhear old Githa, the gossip, clucking about a noblewoman who gifted only a prayer book, claiming love outweighed wealth. The crowd scoffs, but the story lingers, a sign of shifting values. You recall Eleanor's manor, its grandeur fixed in old ways, and Cedric's silks tied to trade's rise. Alina's dowry, soothes, you realize, sits at this crossroads. Her goat and ring are traditional, but the world around her hints at new possibilities: love, consent, partnership. You chuckle, imagining Githa's tales taxed like dowries, her words weighed in coin, your third jest. As dusk settles, you follow Alina to the church steps where she meets Tomasa, his lanky frame softened by a shy smile. He speaks of their future, not her dowry, and you feel a spark of change. The church's push for consent, the market's new wealth, the whispers of rebels like Sarah, all nudge dowries toward a new meaning. Less about rivalry, more about union. You see Marta's tired hands stitching Alina's linens and sense her hope that this shift might ease her daughter's path. Alina's chest, though humble, carries both old duties and new dreams. The town grows quiet, its lanterns glowing like stars. You feel the weight of this transition, dowries evolving from rigid contracts to symbols of shared futures. Alina's ring, Beatrice's quilt, even Eleanor's manor, all reflect a world in flux where tradition bends but doesn't break. You recall Edith's fight for her widow's land, a reminder of the old rule's grip, yet Beatrice's smile suggests a softer path. Alina, standing with Tomas, holds her ring, its silver warm with possibility. As the night deepens, you're ready to reflect on the dowry's lasting legacy, its lessons woven into the modern world. You stand with Alina on the church steps, the glow of her moment, with Tomas fading as you're drawn into a reflective twilight, where the scent of fading blossoms and distant wood smoke wraps around you. Picture yourself in a quiet village square, the medieval world softening into memory, its dowries, goats, manners, silks, now threads in a larger tapestry. You're weaving together the journey of dowries from Alina's humble chest to Eleanor's grand estates to uncover their timeless lessons and lasting echoes in the marriage market. This is the final stretch, a chance to linger with the characters, their struggles, and the truths they've revealed about status, sacrifice, and resilience. You begin where Alina's story took root in a cottage, where her mother Marta stitched linens by firelight, each thread a sacrifice for her daughter's future. By the late medieval period, dowries were more than wealth. They were a language of belonging, speaking to a family's place in a rigid world. You recall Alina's goat, her copper pot, her mother's silver ring, modest yet heavy with hope. Her dowry, you see, was her voice in a society that judged her worth by what she brought. You smile, thinking of her goat, nibbling a saint's statue, a quirky memory that lightens the heart, your first gentle jest. You wander through the journey's peaks, Eleanor's manor, a diplomatic seal in a noble hall, its weight tying her to alliances rather than love. Cedric's silks, bartered in a market where dowries fueled trade and ambition. Edith's widow's land, fought for against greedy kin, a reminder of dowry's fragility. Each story, from Sarah's bear bride rebellion to Beatrice's quilt-backed partnership, showed dowries as both chains and keys binding women to tradition, yet opening doors to status or security. Historians still ponder whether dowries empowered or entrapped, but you feel both in Alina's trembling hands clutching her ring as she faced Tomas's family. Imagine holding that ring now. It's silver warm with Alina's dreams. How much of her courage lingers in its shine? You see her standing with Tomas, his shy smile, a promise that her dowry, though small, was enough. Their union, blessed by Father Anselm, echoes a shift. You traced dowries evolving from rigid status markers to symbols of shared futures, nudged by church consent and market wealth. A quirky tidbit returns some late medieval dowries included a single flower, a nod to love over wealth. You chuckle, picturing Alina's goat chewing that flower, leaving only a stem, your second jest. You pause, reflecting on the social currents dowries rode. They built economies as Simon's hinges and Cedric's wool wove families into trade. They sparked rivalries like the baker's pig feud, where pride clashed louder than church bells. They tested faith as Clara's chalice gleamed under Anselm's blessing, tying marriage to divine order. Yet they also sparked defiance as Sarah's apple-throwing rebellion dared to rewrite the rules. You recall old Githa's gossip, her tales threading every story, and laugh, imagining her voice outlasting the village itself, a final jest your third. The lessons emerge clear as starlight. Dowries taught resilience as Marta's sacrifices and Edith's fight showed the cost of love and survival. They revealed trust as Alina's chest offered to Tomas became a leap of faith in a judging world. They connected us to nature and community, from rural fields to urban markets where every goat or coin tied families to the land and each other. These truths linger, you realize, in modern vows and partnerships where wealth still shapes love, though less overtly. You see Alina's ring on a modern bride's finger. Its meaning softer, but its weight familiar. The square grows still, the medieval world a whisper now. You picture Alina and Tomas, their life begun, with her dowry's humble start, built on Marta's love. Eleanor, bound to her manor's deals, found strength in her role. Sarah, the bear bride, carved her own path, her apple a spark of change. These women, their chests and choices remind you that status is fleeting, but courage endures. You feel the journey's warmth, its storms and stars, and know its lessons, resilience, trust, connection, carry you forward into your own night. Thank you truly for joining me through every emotion, every turn, every moment of this journey. It's been an adventure, and I'm grateful to share it with you. As we close this tale, I wish you a peaceful evening. May you have a restful night, deep sleep, and dreams filled with wonder and light. Rest well, you've earned it. And when you're ready for the next story, I'll be here waiting to journey with you again. Before you go, if you love this tale, please leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what moved you, surprised you, or lingers with you long after the story ends. Until we meet again, good night, and see you in the next adventure.